Hey guys, tonight we begin with a journey into a world where your doctor was more likely to kill you than cure you, and where the most advanced medical treatment for a splitting headache involved the strategic application of vermin droppings. We're stepping back into the filth and fervor of the Middle Ages, a time when life was, to borrow a phrase, nasty, brutish, and short. And your healthcare options usually made it shorter. Forget the romanticized movies with their shining armor and pristine castles. The truth is much darker, much smellier, and infinitely more absurd. It was a world lit by fire, powered by muscle, and medicated with things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the 14th century. And your head is trying to split itself in two. It's not a gentle, modern headache, the kind you nurse with a quiet room and a couple of pills. This is a medieval headache. It's a blacksmith hammering relentlessly on an anvil located directly behind your left eye. The pain is a physical presence in the room, a pulsing, malevolent thing that arrives sometime in the cold darkness before dawn and has no intention of leaving. The light is your enemy, the sliver of gray, morning gloom that seeps through the unglazed window. A mere slit in the wattle and daub wall feels like a hot poker against your retinas. Every sound is an assault. The distant crowing of a rooster, the squeal of a neighbor's pig rooting through the mud and refuse that serves as your street, the low murmur of your family stirring on their own straw pallets on the other side of your one-room hovel. Each noise is another turn of the screw. You try to move, to shift on the lumpy, damp straw that passes for your mattress. The straw is alive with its own tiny ecosystem, and you can feel the familiar prickle of fleas. But even that is a distant annoyance. The main event is the vice grip on your skull. You press the heels of your hands into your eye sockets. A useless gesture that only seems to anger the demon inside your head. This has been going on for 3 days now. At first, your mother tried the usual remedies. A damp rag, cool from the well, laid across your forehead. It did nothing. Then came the bitter herbal tea, brewed from willow bark and whatever other weeds she could find. It only made you gag. Last night, in desperation, she whispered a prayer to Saint Denis, the patron saint of headaches. But apparently, he was busy. You're starting to get scared. In your world, a persistent sickness isn't just an inconvenience, it's a potential omen. Is it a punishment from God, a curse from old widow Agatha? The one you accidentally slighted at the market, is it a foul humor? A poison in your blood that is slowly taking root? You can't afford to be sick. Missing a day's work in the fields means less food on the table. And you're already one bad harvest away from starvation. Your father, a man whose face is a roadmap of hardship, makes the decision. His voice is a low rumble. We'll fetch Anselm. A cold dread trickles down your spine. A feeling almost as unpleasant as the headache itself. Anselm. He's not a physician from a university. Those are for lords and bishops. Anselm is a barber-surgeon. He's the man who pulls teeth, sets broken bones, lets blood, and, when all else fails, saws off limbs. Calling him is the last resort. It's an admission that this is beyond herbs and prayers. It is also expensive. His visit will cost a silver penny, a full day's wages. An hour later, he arrives. You know he's here before you see him, because his smell precedes him. He smells of old sweat, stale wine, rust, and the faint, coppery tang of dried blood. He fills the small, dark space of your home with his presence. He is not a comforting figure. His hands are thick and calloused. His fingernails are rimmed with grime, and his leather apron bears the dark, ghostly stains of a dozen other misfortunes. He grunts a greeting and looks down at you, his eyes clinical and devoid of sympathy. He's not here to hold your hand. He's here to do a job. He asks a few blunt questions, pokes a finger into your temple with a force that makes you cry out, and peers into your eyes. Then he straightens up, stroking his beard, an excess of black bile, et declares, with the unshakable confidence of a man who has no idea what he's talking about. The melancholic humor has settled in the brain, creating a foul vapor. It must be drawn out. It all sounds very official, very serious. You almost feel a flicker of hope. He understands. He has a plan. He sets his heavy leather bag on the floor with a thud and begins to rummage through it. You hear the clink of metal tools, the rustle of dried herbs. What will it be? A foul-tasting tonic, a bit of bleeding. Perhaps you brace yourself. But what he pulls out is not a lancet or a potion bottle. It's a small, greasy-looking cloth pouch. He unties the drawstring and empties the contents into a wooden bowl, a small pile of dark, dry pellets. He adds a splash of vinegar from a flask and begins to grind the pellets into a paste with a small stone pestle. As he works, a new smell fills the room, cutting through the existing miasma of smoke and unwashed humanity. It's an earthy, pungent, deeply unpleasant aroma. The smell of vermin, the smell of filth, fresh, Anselm says, as if presenting a preset delicacy from the granary. The best kind? It takes your pain-addled mind a moment to comprehend. He's making a medicine out of rat dung. You watch in mute horror as he finishes his work, creating a warm, dark, steaming poultice. He scoops the foul concoction onto a square of linen. Your mother looks on, her face a mask of desperate hope and profound disgust. This is science. This is medicine. This is what your hard-earned silver penny is paying for. Anselm leans over you, the warm, stinking poultice held aloft, like a sacred offering. This will draw the vapor from your skull, he explains. The heat opens the pores, and the essence of the rat, a creature of the earth, pulls the sickness back into the soil, where it belongs. And then he lowers it. The warmth is the first thing you feel as the linen makes contact with your forehead, but it is immediately overwhelmed by the smell, now directly under your nose, and the horrifying, gritty texture you can feel through the thin cloth. You have a blinding headache, and the most learned medical professional you have ever met has just glued a paste of rodent excrement and vinegar to your face. You lie there, perfectly still, in the gloom of your family home. The blacksmith is still hammering inside your skull. But now he has an audience. The pain is a throbbing, relentless beat, a drum against which a new, sickening reality is playing out. A cure, you realize with dawning horror, can be so much worse than the disease. Has an audience. The pain is a throbbing, relentless beat, a drum against which a new, sickening reality is playing out. A cure, you realize with dawning horror, can be so much worse than the disease. But to truly understand why someone would even consider applying rodent waste to their forehead, you first have to understand the world that made it seem like a reasonable option. You must step out of your bed, away from the questionable comfort of that offered poultice, and take a deep breath. Go on. Inhale. The first thing that hits you isn't a scent, but a texture. The air is thick, heavy with the smoke from 100 peat fires, the dampness of the river, and something else, something organic and pervasive. It's the smell of life being lived too closely together. Without the modern luxuries of plumbing or weekly garbage collection, you are breathing in a fine mist of everyone else's existence. Let's leave your room. The floor is packed earth, cold and unforgiving against your bare feet. If you're lucky, it's strewn with rushes to soak up the damp and whatever else might fall. Those rushes, by the way, are changed perhaps once or twice a year. They are a thriving ecosystem of mold, fleas, spilled food, and mouse droppings. Your current headache cure, in its raw, unprocessed form, is literally under your feet. You push aside the heavy wool blanket that serves as your door and step into the street. Street is a generous term. It's more of a suggestion, a muddy trough between two rows of leaning, timber-framed houses. There is no pavement. There are no sidewalks. There is only a relentless, viscous mud, a concoction of dirt, rainwater, animal dung, and human waste. From the second-story windows above, you might hear a cry of garde as low, the medieval equivalent of a courtesy flush. If you're not quick, the contents of a chamber pot will become your new hat. The symphony of smells you inhaled indoors was merely the opening act. Out here, the full orchestra is playing. To your left, the butcher has just finished slaughtering a pig. He's done so right on the street, and the blood runs in a dark, sticky stream towards the central gutter, where it mingles with the entrails he's tossed out for the dogs. The dogs, lean and feral, are in a snarling ecstasy. Ahead, the tanner works his hides in a vat of stale urine, an ammonia-rich stench that could strip paint. If paint had been invented yet, the baker's stall offers a brief, welcome respite, the smell of coarse bread, but it's quickly swallowed by the odor from the fishmonger, whose wares are buzzing with a halo of black flies. The unofficial mascots of the era. This is the world your doctor inhabits, and it's crucial to understand that he likely smells worse than the butcher. It seems impossible, doesn't it? The butcher, after all, spends his days elbow deep in animal carcasses. But the butcher has an advantage, a constant, if grim, supply of water. He works near the river, or has a well, and he uses its flow to wash away the worst of the gore. His work is a cycle of fresh death, quickly processed and sold. Your doctor, on the other hand, is a collector. His small, dark office isn't a place of cleansing, but of accumulation. He doesn't deal with clean, swift death. He deals with slow, festering life. The rags he used to bandage a festering wound yesterday are not incinerated in a biohazard container. They are likely rinsed in a bucket of murky water and left to dry in a corner, adding their unique perfume to the room. The flask of a patient's urine he was examining for color and turbidity sits on a shelf, its vapors mingling with the dust. The potions he mixes are not made in a sterile lab. They are ground with a mortar and pestle that has seen 1,000 unspeakable ingredients, from dried beetles to graveyard soil. His leather apron, unlike the butcher's, is not just stained with blood. It's a catalogue of human suffering. A smear of pus from a lanced boil, a spatter of phlegm from a consumptive cough, the residue of a poultice made from pig, dung, and herbs. He carries the scent of every sickness he has ever attended. While the butcher smells of the dead, the doctor smells of the dying. It is a subtle but significant difference. And what of your own hygiene in this world? A full-body bath with hot water is a luxury reserved for the very wealthy, and even for them, it's a rare and complicated event. For you, washing might mean a quick splash of cold, questionable water on your face and hands in the morning. Your clothes, made of coarse wool, are almost never washed. Wool is difficult to clean and takes forever to dry. Instead, you might beat them or air them out, which does little to discourage the lice and fleas that are your constant companions. Everyone itches. It's as normal as breathing. You are never truly alone in your own body. You are a walking habitat, a host to a menagerie of microscopic and not-so-microscopic life. This isn't seen as a failure of hygiene, it is simply the state of being human. And when you fall ill, when your body is racked with fever or your head is pounding, you are not seeking a sterile, white-coated scientist. You are seeking a man who is as much a product of this filth as you are. A man who believes that the cures for the body's imbalances can be found in the muck and mire of the world around him. He sees not filth, but potential. He sees not waste, but ingredients. In a world bathed in muck and misery, where life is cheap and remedies are strange, the logic of the dung poultice begins, ever so slightly, to feel less like madness and more like a desperate grasp for order in an endlessly chaotic world. This is the world that created your doctor. And it is this world that created his Bible, the bizarre, ancient, and utterly dominant theory of the four humors. For order in an endlessly chaotic world, this is the world that created your doctor. And it is this world that created his Bible, the bizarre, ancient, and utterly dominant theory of the four humors. Forget everything you know about germs, viruses, or genetics. Erase the concepts of cells and bacteria from your mind. For Anselm, and for every educated person from ancient Greece to the dawn of the Renaissance, the universe, and by extension, you is made of four fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And inside your body, these elements manifest as four corresponding liquids, or humors. Your body is not a complex biological machine. It is a simple, sloshing sack of fluids. Your health, your personality, your very soul, is nothing more than the balance of these four essences. Think of yourself as a human lava lamp, but instead of groovy wax, you're filled with blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Getting sick is simply a matter of having too much of one, not enough of another, or the batch just being, for lack of a better term, off. Every ache, every fever, every fit of madness or melancholy is a simple plumbing problem. Let's start with the one you actually want. Blood. This is the good stuff. Associated with the element of air and the season of spring, blood is warm and moist. When your blood is in perfect balance, you are sanguine. You are cheerful, optimistic, and sociable. You wake up feeling rosy-cheeked and ready to probably lose a few teeth to a stale piece of bread and then go shovel dung for 12 hours. But you do it with a smile. A sanguine temperament is the medieval ideal. It means you're healthy, virile, and likely to produce heirs. Of course, in a world where a paper cut can lead to a black-fingered death, being sanguine is less a permanent state and more a fleeting moment of grace before the next inevitable disaster. Next is phlegm, linked to water and the endless, damp misery of winter. Phlegm is cold and moist. A person with a dominance of phlegm is phlegmatic. They are calm, quiet, and perhaps a bit sluggish. You know the type. The person who barely reacts when a cartwheel snaps off and sends a load of turnips cascading into the river. They just stare, slowly chew their lip, and eventually wander away. This isn't Zen tranquility. It's a physical state of being. Your internal engine is running cold and damp. Your joints ache with a wet chill. Your thoughts move as slowly as mud sliding down a hill. You are not depressed. You are simply saturated. Then things get spicy. We have yellow bile or choler. This is the humor of fire and summer. It is hot and dry. Too much yellow bile makes you choleric. You are ambitious. Yes, but also aggressive, irritable, and quick to anger. This is your neighbor who screams at his chickens. This is the guard who is a little too enthusiastic with his cudgel. A choleric imbalance feels like a furnace burning behind your ribs. Your skin is flushed. Your mouth is dry. Your temper is perpetually on a hair trigger. Every minor inconvenience, a splinter in your finger, a fly in your ale is a personal insult from God himself, demanding a furious, sputtering response. Fevers, jaundice, skin rashes, all signs that your internal fire is burning out of control. Finally, we arrive at the darkest of the four, black bile, or melancholy, governed by the element of earth and the decaying beauty of autumn. This humor is cold and dry. To be melancholic is to be filled with a profound, unshakable sadness. This isn't just a bad mood. It is a physical ailment, a sludge of cold, dry blackness pooling in your gut. It feels like dust in your lungs and shadows behind your eyes. The melancholic is introspective, artistic, and sensitive, but also prone to a depression so deep it feels like a gravitational pull. In this world, your crippling anxiety and existential dread aren't psychological. They are a literal excess of a dark, earthy fluid that needs to be purged, like cleaning out a clogged drain. So, how does your doctor, Anselm, figure out which of your internal fluids has gone rogue. He doesn't have a lab. He has his senses. He will stare intently at you, noting the color of your skin. He might ask to inspect your stool, prodding it with a stick. But his primary diagnostic tool, his stethoscope and MRI machine rolled into one, is your urine. You will hand him a glass flask of your morning's offering, and he will treat it with the reverence of a wine sommelier. This is uroscopy, and it is high science. He holds the flask to the light, observing the color against a special chart, a urine wheel, which details 20 or so different shades, from a pale straw yellow to a menacing black, each indicating a specific humoral imbalance. He will note any sediment, any cloudiness, any foam. He will give the flask a gentle swirl. He will uncork it and take a deep, thoughtful sniff. And yes, in some cases, if the diagnosis is particularly tricky, he might even take a tiny, professional sip. The sweetness of a patient's urine, for instance, was a known indicator of a specific ailment, though they had no concept of diabetes. To you, it's a horrifying breach of, well, everything. To him, it's just data. Once he has determined your specific imbalance, the cure is brutally logical. The entire goal is to restore equilibrium. If you are too hot and dry from an excess of yellow bile, he must introduce things that are cold and moist. Perhaps he'll prescribe a diet of cucumbers and fish, or have you take a cool bath. If you are too cold and moist from excess phlegm, you need the opposite, hot and dry remedies. He'll give you wine spiced with pepper and ginger, or apply a burning mustard plaster to your chest. But what if you simply have too much times of a humor? Then it must be removed. This is the thinking that launched a billion leeches. Too much blood, making you feverish and sanguine to the point of mania. The answer is obvious: you must have less blood. The doctor will open a vein and drain a pint into a bowl. Too much yellow bile, making you angry and jaundiced. He will give you an emetic, a vile concoction of hellebore or scammony, designed to make you vomit violently until you are empty and weak. All that angry, hot humor is now in a bucket on the floor. Problème sans. This was not a fringe theory. This was the unquestioned, unshakable foundation of all Western medicine for over 500 years. To Anselm, the four humors were not a belief system. They were a biological fact, as real and solid as the stone beneath his feet. His grotesque cures were not guesswork or cruelty. They were the precise and calculated application of this grand, universal theory. A theory that explained everything, from your uncle's gout to your sister's dark moods. And it was this bloody, bile-soaked textbook that Anselm learned, not in a classroom, but on the grimy floor of a workshop that smelled equally of soap, sweat, and infection. He learned it from a man who cut hair as often as he cut flesh. His name was Anselm, and he was not born to this life, but apprenticed to it, much like a boy would be to a cooper or a blacksmith. His university was a cramped, timber-framed shop on a muddy thoroughfare, a place where you could get a shave, a tooth pulled, and the local gossip all in one sitting. His professor was a man named Elric, a barber-surgeon, whose knuckles were as thick as walnuts and whose forearms were a tapestry of old scars and fresh nicks. Elric was a man who believed a steady hand was worth more than a dozen books written in a language he couldn't read. Anselm began as all apprentices do. At the bottom, his first duties had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with cleaning up the aftermath. He swept floors slick with a slurry of hair clippings, spilled ale, and blood. He learned to scrub stains from the wooden patient chair, a sturdy piece of furniture that looked more like an instrument of interrogation, and to dispose of the day's collection of extracted teeth and lanced boils with a nonchalant flick into the street gutter. His hands, still soft and uncalloused, learned the sting of harsh lye soap and the strange, metallic smell of old blood that never quite washed away. He was the keeper of the leeches, feeding the hungry invertebrates on scraps of liver and changing their water, watching them writhe in their slimy jar, waiting for their turn to practice their own tiny, thirsty brand of medicine. His first real lesson in the trade came on a Tuesday. A carter, a man whose face was a road map of burst capillaries from a life of shouting at stubborn mules, stumbled in with a jaw swollen to the size of a pig's bladder, an abscessed tooth. Elric greeted him with the grim cheerfulness of a man who knows his day is about to get louder. There was no anesthetic. Of course, that was a luxury for the unborn. The only comfort offered was a leather strap to bite down on, and Anselm, a boy of maybe 15, ordered to hold the man's flailing head against the chair. Elric produced a pair of tongs from a drawer, brutal, iron things that looked better suited for a forge than a mouth. He wedged the man's jaw open, probed with a grimy finger, and grunted. Anselm could smell the rot from 2 feet away. A sweet, foul odor of decay. He held on tight as Elric clamped the tongs onto the offending molar. The carter's eyes went wide, his muffled screams vibrating through Anselm's own bones. There was a sickening, deep crunch, like a root being torn from hard earth. Then a wet crack. Elric wrenched his arm back, and in the tongs was the tooth, a ragged, 3-pronged, horror-trailing ligaments of flesh. Blood poured from the man's mouth, painting his beard a brilliant, shocking crimson. He spat a thick gob onto the floor, was handed a rag and a cup of questionable wine, and paid his coin. He was out the door in less time than it takes you to find your keys. Elric tossed the tooth into a bucket. "Your turn to clean that up," he said to Anselm, whose hands were still shaking. From teeth, he graduated to blood. Bloodletting was the bread and butter of the barber-surgeon. A fever, bleed them. A melancholy spirit, bleed them. A case of indigestion from bad eel pie, bleed them. It was the answer to everything. Anselm learned to tie a tourniquet, to slap a vein until it stood up. Blue and angry, he learned the quick, sharp flick of the lancet, not too deep, not too shallow. He learned to hold the bowl steady, to watch the dark, viscous liquid swirl, and to make a judgment call based on nothing more than his master's gut feeling. "That's enough. The black bile is coming out now," Elric would declare, peering at blood that was, to any rational eye, simply blood. The patient, now pale and woozy, would often faint. This was considered a resounding success, a sign the body was rebalancing itself. Not that it was being systematically drained of life. His hands, no longer shaking, became instruments of the trade. They grew steady. He learned to lance a boil with a quick, "This easy way up," to brace himself against the inevitable spray of pus and to ignore the shriek of pain that followed. He learned to set a broken bone by yanking it back into place with brute force. The grating sound of bone on bone, a signal of a job done. If not a job done well, he splinted the limb with wood and rags, knowing full well it would likely heal crooked, leaving the poor soul with a limp as a permanent souvenir of his care. The day he truly earned the title of surgeon was the day a blacksmith's apprentice was brought in. His hand mangled in a press, 3 fingers were crushed beyond recognition, and the telltale black creep of gangrene was already starting. Amputation was the only course. Elric, having had too much ale with his lunch, decided it was time for Anselm to take the lead. The apprentice, a boy no older than Anselm, was already white with fear. He was given a generous swig of raw spirit, a drink that would do little for the pain but might, with luck, render him unconscious. He was held down on a table. Anselm's tools were simple, a small, sharp saw and a brazier of glowing coals. He took a breath, the air thick with the smell of sweat and terror. He placed the blade against the flesh, just below the knuckles. He didn't hesitate. To hesitate was to prolong the agony. The saw bit into skin, then muscle, then bone. The sound was unforgettable. A vit, rasping crunch that drowned out the boy's choked screams. It was over in less than a minute. Anselm grabbed a hot iron from the brazier and pressed it to the stump. The sizzle of flesh and the hiss of vapor filled the room with an acrid smoke, cauterizing the wound and, hopefully, preventing a fatal infection. In that moment, something inside Anselm calcified. He wasn't a healer in the gentle sense. He was a mechanic for the human body, a broken, messy, and unreliable machine. He learned that pain was a currency and that sometimes you had to spend a great deal of it to purchase a sliver of a chance at life. He learned to disconnect, to see a screaming man not as a soul in torment, but as a problem to be solved with a blade, a needle, or a hot piece of iron. While the university physicians were off in their drafty halls debating the philosophies of Aristotle, Anselm was wrist-deep in the raw, unforgiving reality of human frailty. He couldn't quote Latin, but he could tell you, from the color of a man's phlegm, just how close he was to death's door. This was his education, and with his apprenticeship served, Anselm was now ready to open his own practice. His hands stained, and his mind filled not with theory, but with the brutal, practical knowledge of how to cut a person open and, just sometimes, how to put them back together again. His own practice. His hands stained, and his mind filled not with theory, but with the brutal, practical knowledge of how to cut a person open and, just sometimes, how to put them back together again. And so his day begins, not with an alarm or the gentle glow of a rising sun through glass, but with a shudder. The cold seeps up from the dirt floor, through the thin straw pallet, and into your bones. This is the same cold Anselm feels as he rises. You can smell the morning before you see it, a damp, earthy scent mixed with the lingering smoke from last night's fire, and the faint, ever-present perfume of human waste from the street outside. His surgery is also his kitchen, his bedroom, and his pantry. Privacy is a luxury for kings. For men like Anselm, life is a single, crowded room. The first knock on the heavy oak door is not a polite rap. It is a series of frantic, desperate thuds that rattle the iron hinges. Anselm doesn't hurry. Desperation is his trade. It's the sound of coin wanting to leave someone else's pocket and enter his. He pulls on a rough-spun tunic, its fibers still holding the metallic scent of old blood, and unbolts the door. Outside stands not the patient, but two sweating servants, their faces flushed with effort. Between them, they carry a finely carved chair, and slumped in that chair is a man of considerable girth. His face a mask of puce-colored rage. This is Lord Percival, a merchant whose success in the wool trade is matched only by the spectacular failure of his own body. One of his feet, swaddled in what was once a fine linen cloth, is propped up on a stool. The cloth is stained, and the foot beneath it is swollen to the size of a small melon. The skin stretched taut and glistening and angry. Volcanic red. Gout, the disease of the wealthy. The body's rebellion against too much wine. Too much roasted swan. Too much everything. Anselm notes, his face a perfect mask of solemn professional concern. He ushers them in, the servants grunting as they maneuver the chair past a hanging bundle of dried herbs that sheds dusty leaves onto Percival's expensive cloak. Anselm doesn't need to ask questions. The diagnosis is written on the man's face. His foot, his very presence, an excess of hot, moist blood. The sanguine humor is boiling over. The treatment is as obvious as the ailment. He gestures to the Lord's arm. One of the servants, well practiced in this routine, rolls up his master's sleeve, revealing a fleshy forearm crisscrossed with the faint, white scars of previous treatments. Anselm's tools are laid out on a wooden table, next to a half-eaten loaf of bread. There is no sterilization, no concept of it. The medieval understanding of infection was that it was caused by bad air, or miasma, not by the filth clinging to the blade of a knife. He picks up a small charpe lancée. The Lord closes his eyes and clenches his jaw, his knuckles white on the armrests of his chair. There is a quick, precise flick of Anselm's wrist. A dark red line appears on the pale skin, welling up and then spilling over. A servant quickly places a wooden bowl underneath to catch the flow. They all watch in silence as the bowl slowly fills. The goal isn't precision, it's volume. Remove the excess humor. Restore the balance. The Lord groans, his face pale now, sweat beading on his brow. Anselm watches the blood, his expression unchanged. After what seems an eternity, when the bowl is nearly half full and the Lord looks about to faint, Anselm notes a bandage which looks suspiciously like a strip torn from an old shirt is tied tightly around the arm. The Lord is given a cup of water with a bitter tincture of willow bark dissolved in it. He will feel better. For a time, whether it's because of the bloodletting, the mild painkiller, or simply because the sharp pain in his arm provides a welcome distraction from the throbbing inferno in his foot, no one can say. The servant drops a few silver coins into Anselm's hand. The first horror of the day is complete. The second knock is lighter, more hesitant. It is a young woman, her face etched with a fear that is far deeper than the discomfort of gout. She carries a small bundle of blankets, and from within comes a weak, wheezing cough. Her son. He is maybe 4 years old, his skin frighteningly hot to the touch, his eyes glassy and unfocused. A fever has taken hold of him. Here, Anselm is out of his depth. A wound can be seen, a bone can be set, but a fever is an internal ghost. A battle fought in the unseen humors of the body. He feels the boy's forehead, too much choler. The hot and dry humor is burning him up from the inside. The logic is simple and completely, tragically wrong. If the body is too hot and dry, you must introduce cold and wet. He prepares a poultice, not of anything soothing, but of clay, vinegar, and ground mustard seed, things he believes have cooling properties. He plasters the cold, gritty paste onto the child's chest. The boy, already miserable, begins to cry, his small body shivering from the shock of the cold against his burning skin. The mother watches, her hands twisting in the fabric of her apron, her face a desperate prayer. She believes this grim-faced man, with his strange-smelling poultices and confident hands, is her only hope. She doesn't see a former barber's apprentice making a terrifying guess. She sees a physician. She pays him with a scrawny chicken from a sack. Its legs tied together, it's likely the last one she owned. Before Anselm can even put the chicken in its coop, a shout comes from the street. There is no knock this time, just the door bursting open. Two men from the tannery drag a third between them. The man's leg is bent at an unnatural angle, a shard of white bone peeking through the torn fabric of his trousers and his skin. A cart lost a wheel and rolled over him. Now, Anselm is no longer a physician. He is a surgeon. He is back in his element. The smell of blood, the reality of shattered bone, this is the world he understands. He orders the man laid out on the table, pushing aside the bread and the blood bowl. He shouts for wine, not for the patient, but to sluice over the wound in a token gesture of cleaning. The man is screaming, a rough, animal sound that fills the small room. Anselm takes a long swallow of wine himself, then hands the wineskin to the patient's friends. Hold him down, he commands, and make him drink. There is no anesthetic. There is only brute force and alcohol. Anselm grips the man's leg, his strong fingers finding the edges of the broken bone. With a sudden, sickening crunch, he forces the bone back under the skin. The man's scream hits a pitch of pure agony, and then he mercifully passes out. Working quickly, Anselm takes a thick needle and coarse thread, the kind used for stitching leather, and begins sewing the jagged wound shut. The stitches are large, crude, and functional to stop any lingering bleeding. He takes a small iron poker from the fire, its tip glowing a dull orange. He presses it to the wound. There is a hiss, and the gut-wrenching smell of cooking flesh. Cauterization. Brutal. Agonizing. But in a world without antibiotics, a hot iron is sometimes the only thing standing between you and a deadly infection. He binds the leg with rough splints of wood and strips of cloth. He has done what he can. The man might live. He might also die of shock. Or the leg might fester and have to be cut off later. But for now, a life has been pulled back from the brink through sheer, bloody-minded craft. His payment this time is no coin, but a promise of free leather for a year. Anselm notes. His morning of groans and gout is over. The sun is barely high in the sky. And somewhere, in another part of the town, A woman with a blinding headache is about to learn what a true medieval cure feels like. The morning of groans and gout is over. The sun is barely high in the sky. And somewhere, in another part of the town, a woman with a blinding headache is about to learn what a true medieval cure feels like. That woman is you. The world outside your window is a dull, muffled roar of cartwheels and shouting. But inside your head, a blacksmith is forging a helmet directly onto your skull. Each strike of his hammer sends a white-hot flash behind your eyes. The light from the window is an enemy. The smell of stew from the kitchen is an assault. You've tried pressing a cold, damp cloth to your forehead, but it's like trying to put out a forest fire with a cup of water. You have prayed. You have cursed. And now, in a moment of sheer, nihilistic desperation, you have sent for the doctor, Anselm. You hear his heavy footsteps on the wooden floorboards before you see him. He enters your small, dim room, and the space seems to shrink. He carries with him the faint, lingering aromas of his previous patients, a bit of infected tissue, a whiff of gangrene, the sharp tang of boiled vinegar. He sets his worn leather bag down with a soft thud and looks at you, his eyes assessing not your pain, but the puzzle you represent. The head he asks, his voice a low rumble. You can only manage a weak nod, afraid that any more vigorous movement will cause your skull to finally crack open. He nods back, a glimmer of knowing confidence in his eyes. This is a common ailment, a simple imbalance. He reaches into his bag, past the gleaming lancets and the jars of dried herbs, and pulls out a small, tightly wrapped leather pouch. He unties it with practiced fingers, and a new smell fills the room. It is earthy, sharp, and deeply unpleasant. It is the unmistakable stench of rodent. He empties the contents into a small wooden bowl, a collection of small, dark pellets, fresh, you note, with a sinking feeling in your gut. They are very, very fresh. This, he proclaims, is the key to your salvation. To you, it's a bowl of rat droppings. To Anselm, it's a triumph of medical logic. To understand why he is about to smear this on your face with the conviction of a genius, you have to understand the medieval mind. It wasn't empty, and it wasn't stupid. It was simply operating on a completely different and utterly broken set of rules, the foundation of Anselm's entire practice. The theory of the four humors insisted that your body was a sloppy container of four liquids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was the perfect balance of these four. Sickness was just one of them getting out of whack. Your headache, Anselm reasons, is a classic case of excess heat. A rogue pocket of yellow bile, which is hot and dry, has risen up from your liver and become trapped in your head. It's boiling away in there, creating pressure and pain. The goal, therefore, is not to mask the pain, but to remove the cause. He needs to draw the offending heat out of your skull. But how this is where the strange, intricate dance of medieval logic begins. The world, to Anselm, is a web of sympathies and antipathies. Things with similar qualities attract one another, while opposites repel, or, in a medical context, can be used to counteract each other. Fire is fought with water. Dryness is fought with moisture, and the hot, angry bile in your head must be fought with something powerfully cold and damp. Enter the rat. What is a rat? Think about it from Anselm's perspective. It is a creature of the earth. It lives in the dark, damp, cool places of the world, in the cellar, beneath the floorboards, in the dirt. It is the opposite of the sun. It is a creature of phlegm, of coolness and moisture. Therefore, everything about the rat carries this essential cooling property. Its very essence is an antidote to heat. And what is the most concentrated, potent distillation of a creature's essence? Its dung. It's not just any filth. It's times specific, times filth. The droppings of a pig, a creature that wallows in the hot sun, would be useless. That would be adding heat to heat. The droppings of a bird, a creature of the air, would be too light and dry. No, it must be the rat, the champion of the cool, damp underworld. Anselm begins his work. He adds a splash of vinegar to the bowl, vinegar being another substance known for its cold properties, and begins to mash the pellets into a thick, dark paste. The smell intensifies. It's a pungent slurry of fermented grapes and rodent waste. He looks at it with the pride of a master chef preparing his signature dish. Every element is chosen with purpose. The poultice he is creating is, in his mind, a perfectly engineered humoral magnet. When applied to your forehead, its intense cold and damp nature will pull, by the law of antipathy, the offending hot and dry bile right through the bone and skin of your forehead. A approaches your bedside. The bowl in one hand, you shrink back into your straw pillow. Your blinding headache now competing with a profound sense of dread. He gestures for you to be still. His expression, one of paternal reassurance. This is for your own good. The first touch of the poultice is a shock. It is warm not from any medicinal property, but simply from being so recently produced. Then the wet, gritty texture as he spreads it across your brow. From temple to temple, he wraps a strip of linen over it to hold the vile concoction in place. The stench is now trapped directly under your nose. An inescapable miasma. You are now wearing a hot compress of rat dung and vinegar. Rest. Anselm says, wiping his hands on a cloth. Let the humors realign. And now, you wait, lying there in the dark, with a throbbing head and a crown of filth. The bizarre placebo of it all begins. If, by sheer chance, your headache begins to subside on its own, as most do, Anselm will be hailed as a miracle worker. His logic will be proven correct. The rat has done its sacred cooling duty. But if the headache worsens, or simply refuses to yield, the logic is equally unassailable. The fault is not with the cure. The fault is with you. Your imbalance of humors must be exceptionally stubborn. Perhaps you sinned, angering God, and thus making your bile more rebellious. Or maybe the poultice needed to be stronger, requiring the dung of a white rat, an animal whose purity would have lent the cure extra potency. Anselm is never wrong. He is merely facing a challenging case. His system of belief is a fortress, completely immune to the arrows of failure. And as you lie there, smelling the evidence of his genius, you realize this isn't an act of random cruelty. It is the pinnacle of his art. A strange, grotesque branch of a medical tree of knowledge, whose roots are planted firmly in filth, and whose logic is as intricate as it is entirely, horrifyingly, wrong, is the pinnacle of his art. A strange, grotesque branch of a medical tree of knowledge, whose roots are planted firmly in filth, and whose logic is as intricate as it is entirely, horrifyingly, wrong. But the rat dung poultice, for all its misguided glory, is just a single tool in Anselm's collection. To truly appreciate the breadth of his craft, you must have the stomach to watch him unbuckle his worn leather satchel. It falls open with a tired sigh, releasing a smell that is uniquely his, a damp, earthy odor of dried herbs, stale blood, and something vaguely metallic, like an old coin held too long in a sweaty palm. This is not a doctor's bag, as you might imagine it. There is no sterile plastic, no neatly wrapped gauze. This is a portable ecosystem of despair. Inside, jostling for space in crudely stitched pockets and small wooden boxes, are his most trusted colleagues, his most loyal assistants, and most of them, you notice with a creeping dread, are still alive. His most prized employees reside in a damp clay jar, stoppered with a greasy rag. You can hear a faint, wet sloshing from within. Anselm handles it with the gentle care a vintner might give a prized bottle of wine. He pulls out the rag, and you see them, leeches, dozens of them, a writhing, glistening black knot of life. To Anselm, these are not disgusting blood-sucking worms. They are precision instruments. Tiny, living syringes designed by God Himself to draw out the body's foul excesses. Your humors are out of balance. Too much blood, perhaps making you hot-tempered and feverish. The cure is simple. He plucks a particularly fat specimen from the jar. It coils around his finger, slick and muscular, questing for warmth. He doesn't need to find a vein. He just needs a patch of skin. He places it on your temple, or your arm, or even your tongue. Depending on the affliction, you feel a small, strange pinch. Not exactly painful, but deeply unsettling. It's the feeling of being prey. The creature latches on, its three-bladed jaw making a microscopic Y-shaped incision, injecting its own anesthetic, so you won't feel the need to swat it away. It is, in its own horrific way, quite polite. And then it begins to drink. You watch it swell, its segmented body growing plump and taut, a tiny wineskin filling with your own life force. When it is satisfied, it simply falls off, drunk and bloated, leaving you a little paler, a little weaker, and, according to Anselm, a great deal healthier. They are his most reliable staff. They never complain. They work for food, and they are always eager for the next shift. If the leeches are his phlebotomists, his surgeons are far, far smaller. In another box, nestled in a bed of damp moss, are his other living assistants, maggots. Imagine you are a soldier, unlucky enough to take a sword to the leg. Weeks later, the wound is not healing. It festers, weeping a yellow-green pus that smells like old meat left in the sun. The flesh around it is blackening. The rot creeping up your limb. Anselm nods sagely. He knows just what to do. He takes a pinch of squirming white larvae and gently sprinkles them into the wound. Your first instinct is to scream, to recoil from this utter violation. But Anselm holds you steady. "Let the little surgeons work," he murmurs. And here, in one of history's most disgusting ironies, he is accidentally correct. The maggots have no interest in your healthy, living tissue. They are connoisseurs of decay. They feast only on the dead, necrotic flesh, meticulously cleaning the wound in a way no human hand could. They are a miracle of debridement. Nature's own cleanup crew. Anselm believes they are eating the bad humors that have collected in the wound. He doesn't know about bacteria or infection, but he knows that a wound cleaned by his tiny surgeons often stops smelling so foul, and the flesh beneath sometimes begins to turn a healthy pink again. It is a rare and stomach-turning moment where a medieval cure isn't, in fact, worse than the disease. But Anselm's practice is not entirely a traveling zoo. His bag also contains a veritable pharmacy of powders, salves, and tinctures, each more bizarre than the last. He has a pouch of Times Mumia *, which is nothing less than the ground-up remains of an Egyptian mummy. Believed to hold the secrets of preservation, he uses it for everything from bruises to internal bleeding. Beside it is a small vial of powdered toad. An excellent remedy, he assures you, for plague boils. Moss scraped from the skull of a hanged man is kept for headaches and seizures. Working on the principle that a remedy should come from the afflicted body part, there are crushed beetles for kidney stones, fox lungs for asthma, and a thick, dark paste of boiled earthworms for aching joints. His is a medicine cabinet stocked by a graveyard, a swamp, and a gallows. Each remedy is prepared with the grim focus of a chef following a sacred recipe, pounding ingredients in a small mortar and pestle, mixing them with wine or vinegar, and whispering what sounds suspiciously like a prayer over the foul-smelling result. And then there is the hardware. Tucked into leather loops are the tools of last resort. Instruments that promise a world of methodical pain. There is the fleam, a wicked-looking metal device with several folding blades of different sizes, designed for letting blood with more speed and less precision than a leech. There is the amputation saw, which looks unsettlingly like something you'd use to prune a tree. Its teeth are coarse, designed for ripping through bone and sinew as quickly as possible. Because your only anesthetic is a shot of cheap brandy and a leather strap to bite down on while two of the doctor's burliest acquaintances hold you down. And most terrifying of all is the cauterizing iron. After the saw has done its work, the only way to stop the bleeding is to seal the wound with fire. You would smell your own flesh cooking. The hiss and sizzle a sound that would haunt your sleep for the rest of your short, one-legged life. Looking at this nightmarish collection, the crawling things, the powdered dead, the rusted metal, you realize, Anselm's most effective tool isn't in his bag at all. It is his voice, his unwavering, calm, confident tone. It is the absolute certainty in his eyes, as he explains that this leech, this maggot, this red-hot poker, is the only thing standing between you and the grave. In a world of profound uncertainty and pain, that confidence is its own kind of medicine. His greatest skill is his ability to look you in the eye and convince you that the horror he is about to inflict is a kindness, and in your desperation, you are all too willing to believe him. Licine, His greatest skill is his ability to look you in the eye and convince you that the horror he is about to inflict is a kindness. And in your desperation, you are all too willing to believe him. But perhaps not today. Today, the throbbing in your temples is a familiar, unwelcome drumbeat. But the thought of Anselm's warm, fragrant rapultis is bar. For once, even less welcome, you lie on your straw pallet, listening to the drip of rainwater through the thatch, and you allow yourself a dangerous luxury, considering the alternatives. Because Anselm, with his bloody apron and his air of grim authority, is not the only game in town. The world of medieval healthcare is less a structured system and more a desperate, chaotic marketplace of misery. And on this particular corner of suffering, 3 very different vendors have set up shop. Your choice is between the established, the heretical, and the fraudulent. Your first option lies at the edge of the village, just where the tamed fields give way to the tangled, ancient woods. Here, in a cottage that seems to have sprouted from the earth itself, lives old Elspeth. No one calls her a doctor. The men in the village call her the wise woman. The priest, in his sermons, calls her a hedge witch. Your mother, in hushed tones, just calls her the one with the herbs, pushing aside the thick woolen flap that serves as her door. You aren't assaulted by the chemical tang of vinegar and decay you'd find at Anselm's. Instead, your senses are flooded with the smell of wood smoke, damp soil, and 1,000 drying plants that hang from the rafters like sleeping bags. It's the scent of the forest, tamed and concentrated. Elspeth herself seems carved from old wood. Her face a roadmap of wrinkles. Her hands stained permanently green and brown from a lifetime of crushing leaves and digging roots. She doesn't have a chart of the humors. She has knowledge passed down from her mother, and her mother before her, a chain of whispers stretching back into pagan times. For your headache, she won't offer dung. She'll brew you a bitter tea from the bark of a willow tree, something that will, against all odds, actually soothe the pain. For a fever, she'll make a cool compress of yarrow for a festering wound, a poultice of moldy bread, a strange, accidental precursor to penicillin that sometimes, miraculously, works. Her pharmacy is the forest floor. Her methods are gentle, quiet, and steeped in a language of charms and moon cycles that makes the church profoundly uncomfortable. And that's the risk. Anselm's cures might kill you, but his failure is seen as God's will or the stubbornness of your humors. If Elspeth's cure fails, or even if it succeeds too well, it's not medicine. It's witchcraft. You came to her for a headache. But if the wrong person sees you leaving her cottage at dusk, you might find yourself answering questions about pacts with the devil. Every cup of her herbal tea comes with a silent, invisible risk of being tied to a stake. You are trading the certainty of physical pain with Anselm for the possibility of spiritual damnation with her. If the threat of hellfire doesn't appeal, you can always wait for the second alternative to roll into town. You'll hear him before you see him. He is the traveling quack, the charlatan, the man with a brightly painted cart, a trained monkey on his shoulder, and a voice that could drown out a blacksmith's hammer. He doesn't call himself a doctor. He calls himself a miracle worker, a purveyor of panaceas. He sets up in the middle of the market square and doesn't speak of balancing your phlegm, He speaks of a secret elixir, gifted to him by a mysterious hermit in the Holy Land. He holds up a small, glistening bottle filled with a shimmering liquid. He calls it aqua vitae, or the serpent's kiss. It cures, he bellows, everything: gout, consumption, baldness, melancholy, warts, and yes, even the relentless pounding inside your skull. He is a master of spectacle. He'll pull a stooge from the crowd, a man pretending to be crippled, who takes one sip and throws his crutches to the sky, dancing a jig to the astonishment of the assembled peasants. The quack's logic is the simplest and most seductive of all. It's easy. There are no leeches, no sows, no dung, just one swift payment, a coin you were saving for bread, and one quick swallow. You know, in the pit of your stomach, that it's a lie. You know his elixir is likely just spiced river water with a bit of berry juice for color. But he is selling something far more potent than medicine. He's selling hope. He's selling a story where your suffering can end instantly, painlessly. He looks you in the eye, not with Anselm's cold pity, but with a conspiratorial, winning smile. He offers you a fantasy. Anselm offers you a nightmare he calls a cure. Elspeth offers a quiet gamble in the shadows. So you stand at the muddy crossroads of medieval medicine. Your head feels like it might split in two. You can turn towards Anselm's door, with its familiar stench of blood and its promise of a scientific, agonizing, and officially sanctioned treatment. You can slip away to Elspeth's cottage, to put your faith in the old ways of the earth and risk the fires of the new faith. Or you can push your way through the crowd, coin in hand, to buy a beautiful lie from a man who will be gone by sunrise. The healer, the witch, or the quack. Each one preys on your fear. Each one offers a different kind of poison, a different kind of salvation. And as the drumbeat in your skull gets louder, you realize you have to choose. Your life, miserable as it is, might just depend on it. Offers a different kind of poison, a different kind of salvation. And as the drumbeat in your skull gets louder, you realize you have to choose. Your life, miserable as it is, might just depend on it. This was precisely the choice facing Lady Elara, a woman whose name would become inextricably, and quite accidentally, linked with Anselm's. She was the wife of a minor lord, a man whose wealth was measured in damp fields and scrawny sheep. Her life, by the standards of the day, was one of unimaginable luxury. She had 2 dresses, slept on a mattress filled with goose feathers rather than straw, and rarely had to wonder where her next meal of gritty bread and boiled mutton was coming from. But for all her privilege, she was a prisoner inside her own head. For weeks, a monstrous pressure had been building behind her eyes. Not a simple ache, but a pulsating, malevolent presence that twisted light into daggers and sound into thunder. The local priest had prayed over her, sprinkling holy water on her pale forehead until her hair was soaked, assuring her it was a test of faith. The village herbalist, an old woman with hands like tangled roots, had applied poultices of willow bark and feverfew, which did little more than make her pillow smell vaguely pleasant. A traveling merchant had even sold her husband a tiny, absurdly expensive vial of phoenix tears, which tasted suspiciously of watered-down wine in desperation. Nothing worked. The demon in her skull only hammered harder. Her husband, a man more comfortable with battle axes than bedside manners, was at his wits' end. A perpetually sick wife was a drain on resources and a social embarrassment. Finally, having exhausted God and nature, he turned to the third option, the man who walked the line between medicine and butchery. He sent for Anselm. Anselm arrived not on a fine horse, but on his own 2 tired feet, his leather bag slung over a shoulder that was permanently stooped. You can picture him entering the manor, a place far grander than any he usually visited. He blinks in the relative darkness. The air thick not with the usual peasant stench of unwashed bodies and despair, but with the cloying smells of beeswax, wood smoke, and damp wool tapestries. He is out of his element, yet he carries himself with the unearned confidence of a man who believes he understands the universe's plumbing. He is led to Lady Elara's chambers. She lies in a large wooden bed, her face a pallid mask of pain, her maids fluttering uselessly around her like moths. Anselm dismisses them with a grunt. He needs no audience for his art. He approaches the bed, and the first thing he does is lean in close and inhale, taking a long, considered sniff of her breath. He then demands a sample of her water in a small clay pot, holding it up to the thin light filtering through the oiled parchment window, scrutinizing its color and turbidity. He doesn't taste this one, a small mercy for which Lady Elara is unconsciously grateful. After a few minutes of theatrical chin-stroking, he delivers his diagnosis. It is, of course, a catastrophic imbalance of the humors, an excess of black bile. The cold, dry humor associated with the earth and autumn has flooded her system, creating a profound and dangerous melancholy. This dark humor, he explains to her bewildered husband, has thickened in her brain, and the hammering she feels is its struggle to escape. The solution obvious, to him at least. The vile humor must be drawn out, but not through the front door. It requires a more subtle, more elemental approach. This is Anselm's moment. This is his masterpiece. The performance that will elevate him from a back-alley bloodletter to a celebrated physician. He doesn't just pull out a lump of rodent dung. He puts on a show. First, he orders a bowl of hot water and vinegar. Into this, he scrapes the precious droppings, a dark, fibrous material collected with great care from the manor's own rat-infested pantry. He adds a pinch of dried mustard seed for heat and a sprig of crushed mint, not for her comfort, but because his master told him it helps to open the pores of the spirit. As he stirs the foul concoction with a wooden stick, he mutters what sounds like a prayer, but is actually a garbled mix of Latin phrases he half remembers, and words he's made up entirely. It sounds important. It sounds ancient. It is medical theater at its finest. The resulting paste is a warm, steaming, dark brown sludge. It smells exactly as you would imagine. With the gravitas of a priest consecrating a wafer, he scoops the mixture onto 2 small squares of linen. He gently, almost tenderly, places the warm poultices on Lady Elara's temples. She flinches at the contact, a low groan escaping her lips. The cure, it seems, is an assault all its own. He instructs her to remain still, to let the poultice's sympathetic magic do its work. The logic as he explains it, is that the potent, earthy essence of the rat, a creature of shadow and earth, will draw out the dark, earthy humor of the black bile. It's like fighting fire with fire. If the fire was a headache, and the other fire was a steaming pile of filth, and then everyone waits. Anselm sits in a corner, sharpening a blade, projecting an aura of calm certainty. The husband paces nervously. The hours crawl by. Lady Ilara drifts in and out of a pained, feverish sleep. The stink of her own cure, filling her nostrils with every breath. The next morning, she wakes up and the headache is gone. Not better, not lessened, vanished. She sits up in bed, blinking in the morning light. A light that no longer feels like an attack. The pressure is gone. The hammering is silent. It is hailed as a miracle. Her husband weeps with relief and gratitude, pressing 2 silver coins into Anselm's hand, more money than he's seen in a month. The maids whisper in awe of the doctor's power. Lady Ilara, weak but lucid, looks at Anselm as if he were an angel sent from God. Never mind that he smells vaguely of rodent waste. The news rips through the town and the surrounding countryside. Anselm, the barber-surgeon, cured the incurable Lady Ilara. He didn't just ease her pain, he exorcised her demon. Of course, we know better. We know it was almost certainly a case of cosmic good timing. She likely had a multi-day migraine, and it simply ran its course. Anselm just happened to have his disgusting poultice on her head when it finally broke. Or perhaps the sheer shock and horror of the treatment, the smell, the texture, the humiliation was so profoundly distracting that her brain simply forgot about the original pain. It's the medieval equivalent of hitting your thumb with a hammer to forget your toothache. But no one in that room considers this. They don't see coincidence. They see causation. They don't see luck. They see genius. Most importantly, Anselm sees it too. That singular, spectacular success, born of sheer, dumb luck, becomes the cornerstone of his entire professional identity. It validates every bizarre theory, every grotesque method he has ever learned. He is no longer just a man with a sharp knife and a strong stomach. He is a healer. The man who tamed the demon in Lady Ilara's skull with nothing but a rat and a prayer. And with this newfound confidence, this dangerous, unearned hubris, he is about to become a whole lot more dangerous to everyone else. Confidence is a dangerous thing. In the hands of a craftsman, it hones a skill. In the hands of a king, it builds an empire. But in the hands of a man who doesn't know what he doesn't know, it is a weapon. And Anselm, fresh from his triumph with Lady Ilara, is now brimming with it. He walks with a straighter back. His gaze lingers a moment longer on those who greet him. A silent reminder that he is the man who stared into the noblewoman's skull and banished her demons. He has forgotten the years of pulling teeth and lancing boils. He is no longer a tradesman. He is an artist of the flesh, a master of the humors. His victory wasn't just over a headache. It was a victory over doubt. And so, when a frantic mother hammers on his door one drizzly afternoon, her face pale with worry, Anselm feels not a flicker of apprehension, but a surge of purpose. This is what he does now. He saves people. Her son, Thomas, is an apprentice blacksmith. He is 17. with arms roped with the kind of muscle that comes from swinging a hammer 10 hours a day. He is the sort of young man you imagine could wrestle a bull to a standstill. But today, he lies on a straw pallet, shivering under a wool blanket, despite the sweat beading on his forehead. His face is flushed. His eyes are glassy, and he groans when he tries to sit up. It is a fever. A simple, common fever. The kind your own grandmother would have treated with cool cloths, willow bark tea, and a few days of rest. But Thomas's mother didn't want simple remedies. She wanted the best. She wanted the man who cured the lady. Anselm enters the small, smoky cottage with the air of a visiting dignitary. He barely glances at the worried parents, his eyes fixed on the patient. He pushes back the damp blanket, ignoring the boy's whimper of protest as the chill air hits his skin. Anselm presses a hand to Thomas's forehead, then to his chest. He feels the racing pulse at the boy's wrist. He notes slyly, his expression one of intense, serious concentration. He has seen this 1,000 times. The diagnosis is so obvious, so elementary. It's almost beneath him now. An excess of blood, he proclaims, his voice filling the tiny room. The sanguine humor is boiling. It is a fire within him. And we must let the heat escape before it cooks his very organs. The parents nod, their faces a mixture of fear and relief. A diagnosis, an answer. It has a name, a reason. It is not some random curse or a punishment from God. It is a mechanical problem. And this man, this expert, knows how to fix the machine. Anselm opens his worn leather bag, the tools clattering softly. He speaks as he works, his voice a calm, authoritative drone. The body, he explains, is like a wineskin. If it is too full, the pressure builds, the wine sours, and the skin itself is in danger of bursting. One must simply open a tap and let the excess out. It's pure, simply logic. He lays out a rag and selects a small, sharp knife, his lancet. He doesn't bother to wipe it. The grime of the last patient is still the grime of this patient. It is all just part of the world's filth. He instructs the father to hold Thomas's arm steady. The boy is weak, barely able to resist, his protests turning into a low moan. Anselm finds the vein on the inside of the elbow, a faint blue line beneath the fever-hot skin. He makes a quick, practiced slice. The blood that wells up is dark and thick. It spills into the small wooden bowl Anselm holds beneath the cut. He watches the flow with an expert's eye. A vintner tasting a new wine. See how dark it is, he says to the anxious mother. It is corrupted, full of the fever's heat. We must drain it until it runs clear and cool. Of course, it never will. The bowl fills. Thomas grows paler. The shivering subsides, replaced by a limp lethargy. His breathing becomes shallow. This, to Anselm's confident mind, is progress. The fire is being dampened. He has released the pressure. He bandages the arm with a strip of linen and stands back, wiping the lancet on his tunic. He has done good work. But when he returns the next morning, the fire has not been quenched. Thomas is weaker. His skin has a grayish pallor, and his eyes struggle to focus. He can't even lift his head. The mother is weeping silently in the corner. Anselm frowns. The imbalance is more stubborn than he thought. The corrupt blood was merely a symptom of a deeper rot. The other humors must be in revolt as well. The phlegm in his chest and the black bile in his gut are feeding the fire. He announces, "We drained the fuel. Now we must smother the embers." His new prescription is twofold. First, a powerful emetic to make Thomas vomit. Purging the phlegm from his stomach, he mixes a foul-smelling concoction of white hellebore and mustard seed in a cup of lukewarm water and forces it down the boy's throat. The reaction is immediate and violent. Thomas's body, already desperately low on fluids, heaves and convulses, bringing up little more than bitter, watery bile. He collapses back onto the pallet, gasping for air, his throat raw. Before the family can even process this new horror, Anselm prepares the second phase, a purgative, a brutal mixture designed to scour the bowels and expel the corrupting black bile. This is the cure that becomes the curse. A simple fever, which the body's own magnificent defenses were already fighting, might have broken on its own in a day or two. But now, that body is under a three-pronged assault. The fever is burning its resources. The bloodletting has stolen its strength. And the purges are draining its last reserves of water. Thomas is dying not from the disease, but from the cure. Every violent spasm, every weak cry, every sign of profound dehydration and shock is interpreted by Anselm as a victory. The humors are in full retreat, he declares, pointing at the meager results of the purge. He is fighting it. We have it on the run. By the third day, there is no fight left. Thomas is a ghost, a pale, hollowed-out shell of the vibrant boy he was just days before. His lips are cracked. His eyes are sunken into his skull. He does not speak. He barely breathes. Anselm stands over him, truly perplexed for the first time. He has done everything right, everything the books and his master had taught him. He bled the excess heat, purged the corrupting influences. He followed the logic perfectly. The only possible conclusion is that the boy's constitution was simply too weak. The imbalance was too profound from the start. He was a faulty vessel, destined to break. Anselm places a hand on Thomas's chest one last time. There is no warmth, no fever, no fire. There is only a profound, spreading cold. The boy is gone. Et murmures a quiet prayer. A formality more for the parents than for the boy. He packs his bag, the tools clattering with a sound that now seems less professional and more like the rattling of bones. He accepts a few coins from the heartbroken father, a fraction of his usual fee. A gesture of professional sympathy. As he steps out of the dark, grief-stricken cottage and into the weak afternoon light, he leaves behind not just a dead boy, but a question. It hangs in the air like smoke from the blacksmith's forge. Lady Elara's cure was a miracle, but the death of Thomas, that felt like something else entirely. It felt like a mistake. And in a town that lives so close to the line between fate and human folly, a doctor's mistake is a very dangerous thing to whisper about. It felt like something else entirely. It felt like a mistake. And in a town that lives so close to the line between fate and human folly, a doctor's mistake is a very dangerous thing to whisper about. And a whisper is how it begins, not as a shout or a formal accusation. It starts as a breath of sound in the dim, smoky corner of the tavern, shared between two farmers over lukewarm ale. It smells of wet wool and damp earth. The boy was strong. One mutters into his cup. Strong, until the dung doctor came. The other man just nods, his eyes wide, and takes a slow drink. The whisper has been planted. The next day, you hear it again at the market. A bit louder now. It flits between the butcher's stall and the woman selling stringy-looking chickens. Goodwife Elspeth, whose cousin was married to the dead boy's aunt, is telling anyone who will listen a terrible fever. Yes, she says, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. But the marks on his skin afterward, they weren't natural. Black. They were like the devil's own thumbprint. Suddenly, Anselm is no longer just the town's eccentric healer. The narrative is changing. Before, his strangeness was a feature, not a bug. His poultices were foul, his methods bizarre, but they were times his asterisk. They were the price you paid for a chance at a cure. Now, that same strangeness is being recast. It's being held up to the flickering torchlight of suspicion and fear. And it looks different. It looks sinister. His knowledge of herbs, once seen as a gift, is now evidence of dark packs made in the woods at midnight. The jars of leeches lining his shelves aren't medicinal tools. They are bloated, unholy familiars. His quiet muttering while he works a habit of concentration. Perhaps a simple prayer is twisted into the sound of an incantation. You see him from across the market square, his familiar stooped walk, his robes stained with things you'd rather not identify. A month ago, you might have nodded, a gesture of respect for a man who wrestled with death for a living. Today, you find yourself pulling your child a little closer, turning your head to inspect a head of cabbage with sudden, intense interest. You pretend you don't see him? Why? Because the whisper has reached your ears. 2. You heard it from the blacksmith, who said the doctor's hands were always cold, even in summer. You heard it from the weaver, who swore she saw a strange light in his window on the night of the new moon. It's the medieval equivalent of a 1-star Yelp review. Except, instead of a bad meal, the complaint is, gave my husband a fatal infection and possibly cursed my livestock. In a world lit only by fire, the shadows are very long indeed, and they are filled with demons, imps, and angry spirits. There is no germ theory. There is no clinical standard of care. There is only God's will and the devil's work. A recovery is a miracle. A death is a judgment. But a death that feels times wrong, times a death that comes after a strange man, applies a paste of rodent filth and whispers words no one understands that falls into a terrifying gray area. It's an anomaly. And the medieval mind abhors an anomaly. It must be explained, and the easiest explanation is never incompetence. It's malice. It's witchcraft. The whispers inevitably find their way to the ears of the man who trades in souls, the parish priest. Father Thomas. He is not a cruel man. He is a shepherd, and he believes his flock is being threatened by a wolf. He has tolerated Anselm, this strange man who operates on the fringes of acceptable healing. After all, the university-trained physicians rarely ventured into a muddy backwater town like this. Anselm was a necessary, if slightly unsavory, part of the ecosystem. But now, the stories are piling up. Not just the boy with the fever. There was the old man whose gout-ridden leg treated by Anselm, turned black and had to be sawn off. There was the woman whose persistent cough, after a dose of Anselm's herbal brew, turned into a bloody spray that took her in 3 days. Each failure is another log on the pyre of suspicion. Father Thomas begins to watch him. From the cool stone archway of the church, he observes Anselm crossing the square. He sees not a healer, but a man whose entire practice seems to be a parody of the sacred rites. Anselm uses strange concoctions instead of holy water. He relies on bloodletting and dung instead of prayer and penance. In an era where your eternal soul was your most valuable and easily forfeited asset, Anselm's entire profession is an act of spiritual defiance. He is attempting to fix God's divine machinery with tools bought from the devil's own workshop. Anselm, for his part, is probably the last to know the true danger he is in. He feels the cold shoulders. He sees the doors that close a little too quickly as he approaches. He notices the tavern goes quiet when he enters for a rare cup of mead. He likely chalks it up to grief and ignorance. The family of the boy is lashing out. The town is superstitious. He is a man of, well, not science, but a system. He believes in his humors, his poultices, his grim and messy craft. He is too busy wrestling with the infuriatingly complex frailties of the human body to pay attention to the far simpler and far more lethal frailties of human fear. The tipping point comes on a damp autumn evening. A farmer's prize cow, the one that provides milk for 3 families, falls ill. In a panic, the farmer sends for Anselm. The doctor does what he knows. He examines the beast, mutters about an imbalance of phlegm, and prepares a drench made from boiled nettles and, for good measure, a bit of dried toad skin. The next morning, the cow is dead. That is all it takes. The whispers become a roar. It's one thing to lose a person. People are fragile, their souls eager to fly to heaven. But a cow is wealth. A cow is survival. Its death is a direct attack on the community's well-being. This was no fever. This was a curse. The whispers now have a name: sorcery, heresy. The knock on his door comes a week later. It's not the frantic, desperate rap of a husband with a laboring wife, or a mother with a feverish child. It is a slow, heavy, deliberate thud. 3 knocks that echo in the small, herb-scented room. When Anselm opens the door, he doesn't see a patient. He sees Father Thomas, his face a grim mask of pious certainty, and behind him stand 2 men from the parish council, their expressions hard as stone, their hands resting on the hilts of the short swords at their belts. The time for whispers, carried on the damp evening air, is over. The time for an accounting has begun, their expressions hard as stone, their hands resting on the hilts of the short swords at their belts. The time for whispers, carried on the damp evening air, is over. The time for an accounting has begun. The walk is blessedly short and profoundly long. You aren't being dragged. Not exactly, but the guard's hands on Anselm's arms are firm reminders that this is not a negotiation. The mud of the street tries to claim his worn leather shoes with every step. A thick, greedy sound in the otherwise silent night. The destination isn't the dungeon or the town square. It is, of course, the church, because where else would you try a man for playing God? But in God's own house, The air inside the chapter house is a different kind of cold. Outside, it's the damp, living chill of the earth. In here, it's the ancient, dead cold of stone and certainty. It smells of old beeswax, incense, and something else. The faint, dry scent of decaying paper and unwavering conviction. You can feel the chill seep up from the flagstones, through the soles of your shoes. A cold that doesn't care about your flesh. There is no jury. There is no public gallery. There is only a long, dark oak table, scarred with the knife marks of 100 bored deacons. Seated behind it are 3 men. In the center is Father Thomas, his face a mask of pious severity, his eyes dark pools that seem to have judged you. Anselm, and the entire fallen world long before you walked in. To his right is a younger priest, his face smooth and eager, taking notes with a quill that scratches aggressively against the parchment. To his left sits the local bailiff, a man whose authority comes from the Lord of the Manor, not the Lord in heaven. But he's here to lend the proceedings the thin veneer of secular law. This isn't a court of law, it's a performance review with the regional manager of the Almighty, and your quarterly numbers have been slipping. Anselm is guided to a single, backless stool placed a dozen feet from the table. It is designed for maximum discomfort. He sits. The silence stretches, thick and heavy as wool soaked in winter rain. Finally, Father Thomas leans forward, his robes rustling like dry leaves. Anselm. The priest's voice is not loud, but it fills the room. Each word, a carefully placed stone. You are known in this town as a healer, a man of medicine. Anselm nods, his throat suddenly dry. I try to ease suffering, Father, as the scriptures bid us. A good start, pious, humble. To ease suffering, Father Thomas repeats, letting the words hang in the air. An admirable goal. Yet, the means by which you practice this craft have come to our attention. Whispers have become shouts. Concern has curdled into accusation. The younger priest stops scratching and looks up, his eyes wide with a kind of thrilled horror. It is said, Father Thomas continues, steepling his fingers, that you employ unclean things, that your remedies are born not of nature's bounty as God provides it, but of filth, of rot, of things best left to the midden heap. Here it is, the central complaint, dressed up in the language of sin. They aren't asking if his medicine works. They're asking if it's holy. Father, Anselm begins, his voice steadier than he feels. The great physician Galen himself taught that the physician is but a servant to nature. We must use the tools God has placed in the world, whether they be a fragrant herb from the garden or a substance from a more humble creature. A humble creature, Father Thomas says, a sliver of ice in his tone. You mean a rat? The word lands on the table like a dissected organ. The bailiff shifts uncomfortably, even for him. This is strange territory. Let us speak plainly. Anselm, you took the dung of a rat, a creature of the sewer and the plague pit, and you applied it to the head of a sick woman. Explain this. Explain how this is not an act of mockery against God's temple. The human body. Now, Anselm must perform the most dangerous surgery of his life. He must dissect his own logic, For men who are looking for heresy, not healing, he takes a breath, trying to summon the authority he feels when leaning over a patient. Your Reverence, it is a matter of the humors. As you know, all things are composed of the four essences: blood, which is hot and moist; phlegm, cold and moist; yellow bile, hot and dry; and black bile, cold and dry. Sickness is merely an imbalance of these essences. He sees a flicker of understanding in the priest's eyes. This is familiar ground. This is sanctioned knowledge. A headache, such as the one Lady Elara suffered, Anselm presses on, is often caused by an excess of hot, moist humors rising to the brain, fumes, vapors, trapped in the skull. To draw them out, one must apply a remedy that is the opposite, one that is cold and dry. He pauses, letting them follow his bizarre, yet internally consistent, train of thought. The rat, Father, is a creature of the cold earth. It lives in darkness, in dry places. Its very nature is cold and dry. Therefore, its leavings, its dung, carries that essential property in its purest form. When made into a warm poultice, the heat allows the essence to pass into the skin, while the substance itself, being cold and dry, draws out the foul, hot vapors that cause the pain. It restores the balance that God Himself designed. He finishes, his chest tight. He has just tried to explain quantum physics using a children's pop-up book about farm animals. The silence returns, heavier than before. The quill of the young priest is silent. Father Thomas stares at him, his expression unreadable. You have given this much thought. It is my life's work. Father, your life's work. The priest murmurs. He leans back. And what of the boy, the cooper's son? Leo, he had a simple fever. You bled him. You gave him concoctions of willow bark and other things. And he died. Was his balance restored? The sarcasm is a physical blow. The air goes out of Anselm. The neat, ordered world of humors and essences shatters against the hard, simple fact of a small, cold body. He can't explain that away with Galen. The boy's face flashes in his mind, pale, sweating, his eyes wide with fear. Sometimes the sickness is too strong. Father, Anselm says, his voice barely a whisper. The imbalance is too great. God's will is not for us to question. He has retreated to the last defense of the desperate piety. God's will, Father Thomas says softly, a terrible finality in his voice, or the devil's work. He, too, can twist nature to his own ends. He can offer a cure that looks like a miracle, only to claim the soul in the end. He can whisper remedies of filth and shadow into a man's ear, promising knowledge that belongs only to God. The priest stands up, the scraping of his chair echoing in the stone chamber. He walks to the small, arched window and looks out into the darkness. We must consider what you have told us. We must pray for discernment, to separate the healer's art from the sorcerer's craft. He turns back, his face a shadow against the faint moonlight. You will wait here. We will deliberate, pray. Anselm, pray that your work has truly been in God's service, because if it has not, He will not be the only one who demands a price. He faint moonlight. You will wait here. We will deliberate. Pray. Anselm. Pray that your work has truly been in God's service, because if it has not, he will not be the only one who demands a price. The heavy oak door groans shut, and the sound of a bolt sliding into place echoes in the small stone chamber. The room is little more than a closet, carved from the cold underbelly of the church. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone, ancien dust, and the faint, sweet smell of decay that seems to permeate everything in this age. Anselm sinks onto a low stone bench, the chill of it seeping through his thin tunic. A single rat, emboldened by the silence, scurries from one shadow to another. For the first time, Anselm feels a kinship with the creature. Both of them are scavengers, surviving on the refuse of a world that despises them. Hours crawl by. Time becomes a thick, slow-moving sludge. He can hear the muffled drone of the priests' voices from the chamber above, a low hum of judgment that vibrates through the floor. He tries to pray, as he was told, but the words feel hollow, like stones dropping into a dry well. What can he pray for? Forgiveness for the boy who died of fever, absolution for the poultices of dung and the vials of questionable herbs, or should he pray for the ignorance of his judges? For them to see the logic, however twisted, in his attempts to fight the darkness. Upstairs, in the sacristy, the air is warmer but no less oppressive. 6 men sit around a heavy wooden table, their faces illuminated by the flickering dance of a dozen beeswax candles. The shadows they cast are long and accusatory. There is Father Thomas, his face a mask of pious certainty, and 3 other parish priests, their expressions ranging from weary to fearful. Alongside them are 2 of the town's elders, merchants whose wealth has bought them a seat at the table of power. Their concern is less for Anselm's soul and more for the town's stability. His methods are an abomination. Father Thomas begins, his voice low but sharp. He invokes no signs. He relies on filth and vermin, the very instruments of the devil. The dung of rats, the blood of leeches, this is not the work of a healer. It is the work of a hedge witch, a mockery of God's divine order. An elder, a portly wool merchant named Gilbert, shifts uncomfortably. But Father, he has had successes. Lady Ilara. Lady Ilara's recovery was a miracle of God, a test of her faith in the face of this man's grotesque theatrics. Thomas counters, his voice rising. And what of the others? The cooper's boy, dead from a simple ague. Anselm's tinctures and bleedings only hastened his journey to the grave. He plays with forces he does not understand. We risk God's wrath by allowing him to continue. The debate circles like a vulture. For every argument of blasphemy, there is a counter-argument of practicality. They are not truly debating Anselm's guilt or innocence. They are engaged in a far more medieval calculation, a cost-benefit analysis of divine retribution. It's the 14th century equivalent of keeping a terrible IT guy on staff because he's the only one who knows the password to the server. Anselm is a liability, a potential magnet for damnation. But the alternative is terrifyingly blank. Then, the door to the sacristy creaks open. A young acolyte stands there, pale and trembling, his eyes wide. He looks as if he's seen a ghost. Forgive me, Fathers, Master Gilbert, but a writer has just arrived from Oakhaven. He says a sickness has taken hold, a fever that turns the skin black. Silence. The candles flicker, and for a moment, it feels as if all the air has been sucked from the room. Oakhaven is only half a day's ride away. Black skin. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. It is the whisper they all dread. The two words that can empty a town faster than a marauding army, the pestilence. The theological debate evaporates instantly. The abstract fear of God's wrath is suddenly replaced by the very real, very visceral terror of the plague. The arguments about rat dung and heresy seem profoundly, comically irrelevant. Gilbert, the wool merchant, is the first to speak. His voice strained. We have no one else. It is a simple statement, but it carries the weight of 100 unsaid fears. No one else, no one to mix a poultice, however disgusting. No one to let blood, however misguided. No one to stand between them and the agonizing, undignified death the writer's news promised. Anselm, the potential heretic, has in the span of a single breath become Anselm. The only defense they have. Father Thomas looks defeated. The fire of righteousness in his eyes has been replaced by the flat, dull sheen of fear. He knows he has lost. You cannot argue theology with a corpse. Anselm is pulled from his cold vigil and dragged back upstairs. He blinks in the sudden candlelight, his eyes struggling to adjust. The faces that stare back at him are different now. The cold judgment is gone, replaced by something far more unsettling, desperate. Clinging hope. Father Thomas stands, holding a piece of parchment. He does not look at Anselm, but at some point on the wall just over his head. Anselm. He begins, his voice stiff and formal. We have considered your testimony. We find your methods troubling. They stray dangerously close to the profane and show a lack of proper reverence for God's divine will. Anselm's stomach clenches. This is it. The pyre or the dungeon. However, Thomas continues, and the word hangs in the air, heavy with unspoken bargains. It is the judgment of this council that your intent has not been malicious. You have sought to heal, not to harm. Therefore, you are not condemned as a heretic. A wave of relief so powerful it makes Anselm dizzy washes over him. But it is short-lived. You will continue your work. The priest says, his eyes finally meeting Anselm's. They are cold, hard stones, but you will do so under the authority of the Church. You will attend Mass daily. You will preface every treatment with prayer. Your more earthly ingredients will be blessed by a priest. You are not a free agent. Anselm, you are now an instrument to be wielded by us. Do you understand? Anselm can only nod, his throat too dry to speak. He understands perfectly. He hasn't been found innocent. He's been conscripted. He is no longer just a doctor, he is a scarecrow, propped up in the field to frighten away the great black bird of death. His value is not in his skill, but in his mere existence. They need a body, a pair of hands, a name to cling to when the fevers begin. The verdict was not written on that parchment. It was written on their terrified faces, a judgment delivered not by God, but by the rumor of a cough in a village miles away. Fear, it seems, is the ultimate arbiter of justice. And on that parchment, It was written on their terrified faces, a judgment delivered not by God, but by the rumor of a cough in a village miles away. Fear, it seems, is the ultimate arbiter of justice, and so Anselm the Dung Doctor was allowed to continue being Anselm the Dung Doctor. He was not exonerated. He was not forgiven. He was simply necessary. His medieval malpractice insurance was the simple fact that he was slightly less terrifying than the plague itself. He was the devil they knew, a familiar gargoyle on the crumbling cathedral of their health, preferable to the vast, unknown emptiness of having no one at all to call when the sweating sickness began. The years that followed the trial were not golden. They were gray, gray like the winter slush that filled the ruts in the road outside his door, gray like the ash in his hearth on a cold morning, gray like the film that was slowly, imperceptibly, creeping over his own eyes. You can imagine him now, an older man. The confident stride has been worn down to a shuffle. His back, once straight from the pride of his profession, is now a permanent, questioning arch, bent by the weight of remedies that didn't work and bodies he couldn't mend. His workshop is the same, yet different. The familiar smells are all there, the sharp tang of vinegar, the dusty sweetness of dried herbs, the faint, ever-present undertone of decay. But a new scent has joined them, the scent of loneliness, the scent of failure, which smells a lot like damp stone and regret. You can almost feel the chill that has nothing to do with the draft snaking under the door. It's a cold that radiates from the man himself. He still practices his craft. What else is there to do? There is no concept of retirement. There is no pension plan waiting for the barber-surgeon, who has seen too much. You work until you can't, and then you die. So, the villagers still knock. A farmer with a foot swollen to the size of a small melon from a rusty nail. A young woman whose monthly humors have gone awry, leaving her pale and listless. A merchant with gout, his toe a throbbing, purple testament to a life of rich food and cheap wine. Anselm sees them all. He nods, his face a mask of weary wisdom. He lights a candle and holds up the glass vial of urine, squinting at it as if it were a sacred text revealing the secrets of the universe. He still declares the phlegm to be too thick, the yellow bile too hot. He still prescribes the familiar cures, a poultice of boiled cabbage and pig fat for the swollen foot, a tincture of wormwood to rebalance the woman's fluids, and for the gout, leeches. Of course, fat, hungry ones, followed by a strict diet that the merchant will absolutely ignore the moment he's out of earshot. But something has broken inside him. The certainty is gone, replaced by a hollow echo. He pounds herbs in his mortar, the stone pestle rising and falling in a rhythm he's known his entire life. Yet his hands sometimes freeze mid-motion. His gaze will drift to a dark corner of the room, and he is no longer there. He is back in a small, suffocating chamber, watching a little boy's chest struggle for one more breath. He can still smell the sick, sweet air, still feel the father's hand on his shoulder. Not in anger, but in a soul-crushing plea that Anselm knew. Even then, he could not answer. These are the ghosts that now share his workshop, not spirits of the dead, but memories with weight and texture. The face of the boy with the fever, the one he bled too much, the one whose simple ailment became a death sentence under his care, the wide, Terrified eyes of a woman in childbirth, whose womb he'd tried to cleanse with a smoldering bundle of herbs. The silent, accusing stare of a man whose gangrenous leg he'd sawn off, only to watch him die from the shock and the filth of it all. They don't speak, these ghosts. They just watch him measure out his powders and mash his dung. Their presence a constant, silent trial that makes the church's inquiry feel like a pleasant afternoon debate. He is haunted not by the devil, but by his own profound, suffocating ignorance. He still believes in the four humors he has to abandon that belief now would be to admit his entire life, every patient he's ever touched, every cure he's ever prescribed, has been an exercise in futility. It would be like a priest admitting, on his deathbed, that he's not entirely sure about the whole God thing. The foundation of his world would crumble to dust, and he is too old and too tired to build a new one. And so he clings to the old ways, the old certainties. Even as they fail him again and again, he'll sit alone by his fire at night, the day's meager earnings in a small leather pouch. He's not thinking of coin. He's running through the day's cases. He'll stare at his own hands, gnarled and stained, the nails thick and yellow. These were the hands that were supposed to bring balance, the hands that set bones, stitched wounds, and delivered tinctures of healing. But they feel more like the clumsy, awkward hands of a butcher now. Tools that have caused as much suffering as they have ever alleviated. He picks up a dried rat from a dusty jar on the shelf. Its body is light, fragile, a husk of what it once was. He turns it over and over, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of its spine. This was it, the foundation of his fame, the cure for the pounding in a man's skull. He looks at the desiccated creature, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than confidence crosses his face. It is not quite doubt. It's more like a deep, deep weariness, a fatigue so profound it settles in his bones. He is a man armed with rat dung and superstition, standing against the tidal wave of disease and death, and he knows, in the quietest, most secret corners of his heart, that the tide is winning. Honest, he is a man armed with rat dung and superstition, standing against the tidal wave of disease and death, and he knows, in the quietest, most secret corners of his heart, that the tide is winning. It is easy, from the comfort of your soft bed, to look back at Anselm and see a fool, a monster, even a man who peddled filth and false hope. You can smell the reek of his poultices. You can feel the chill of his unwashed hands. And you can judge him. You can laugh at the absurdity of it all. The theory of humors seems as ridiculous to you as the idea that the world is flat. Bloodletting, a barbaric practice. Rat dung for a headache. The punchline to a grim joke. But now, just for a moment, let's travel forward, 500 years into the future. Imagine a student, not unlike yourself, lying comfortably in their, well, whatever passes for a bed then, a sonic cradle, perhaps, or a suspension field. They are studying the strange, superstitious medical practices of the distant 21st century. They are studying you. Their histories will describe a civilization that, despite its towering cities and instantaneous global communication, was riddled with bizarre and brutal medical rituals. They will read about a procedure called chemotherapy. They will learn that when a person's body grew a sickness within itself, the doctors of your time would respond by systematically poisoning the entire person. They would drip caustic chemicals into their veins for hours, hoping the poison would kill the sickness just a little bit faster than it killed the patient. The future student shudders, reading about how this ritual caused people's hair to fall out, their bodies to waste away, their every waking moment to be filled with nausea. To this future mind, it sounds like a desperate, full-body exorcism. It sounds no more logical than bleeding a patient to death to cure a fever. They will read about how you treated sadness. In your time, a profound melancholy of the soul was not treated with rest, or community, or a change in life, but with tiny, mass-produced chalky pills. You swallowed a specific chemical every single day, believing it could recalibrate your very spirit. This future historian will see it as a strange kind of alchemy, a belief that you could mechanically adjust the elusive essence of a personality. They might compare it to Anselm's belief that a physical substance, the dung of a rat, could alter the internal balance of a person's head. They are both physical cures for ailments that are felt but not seen. And they will be utterly baffled by your approach to surgery. They'll learn that people willingly paid fortunes to be put into a chemically induced coma, to have their bodies sliced open with sterilized knives, not always to cure a disease, but simply to change their shape. Surgeons would insert bags of saline gel and hard pieces of plastic into their bodies, altering the shape of a nose or the size of a breast. The student of the future will see this as a ritual of high-tech mutilation, a desperate attempt to conform to the strange, fleeting beauty standards of your era, broadcast on your glowing rectangles. To them, it will seem just as arcane as a tribal scarification ceremony. They might even uncover your everyday superstitions. They will see a people utterly dependent on a bitter, black drink made from roasted beans to simply function in the morning. A society that consumed bubbling, sugary potions from brightly colored cans for a burst of energy, knowing full well these elixirs were rotting their teeth and straining their hearts. Your energy drink will seem no different to them than a medieval peasant chewing on a specific root said to grant vigor. Both are folk remedies, consumed on faith. And what will they think of your primary source of medical information? You don't always go to a trained physician. First, you consult the great oracle, the internet. You type your symptoms into a search bar and are met with 1,000 contradictory diagnoses from anonymous strangers, corporate advertisements, and panicked forums. You diagnose yourself with a terminal illness based on a blog post written by someone with no medical training. To the future, this will look like a form of digital scrying, gazing into a chaotic well of information and pulling out the most terrifying prophecy. Anselm listened to old wives' tales. You listen to algorithms. Is there truly a difference? The core belief of Anselm's time was the four humors. It was their grand deduced, unifying theory of everything. The core belief of your time is the germ theory. The chemical theory, you believe your bodies are elegant machines that can be fixed by killing microscopic invaders or by adding or subtracting specific molecules. It is your foundational superstition. It explains almost everything, so you trust it implicitly. But future generations, armed with knowledge you can't even fathom, will see the gaping holes in your theories. They will see the things you got catastrophically wrong. They will see the millions who suffered and died, not from their illnesses, but from the confident, well-intentioned, and utterly misguided cures offered by your most respected healers. So as you settle deeper into your pillow, and the world of Anselm fades away, spare a final thought for that medieval doctor. He was not a monster. He was a man of his time. Just as you are a person of yours, he used the best tools he had, guided by the most advanced knowledge available to him. His tools were leeches and dung. Yours are radiation and pills. He was trying to push back the darkness, the same darkness you tried to push back. The fear of pain, the terror of the unknown, the finality of death. Perhaps one day, a person will lie in their sonic cradle, listening to a soothing narrator tell the story of your life. They will hear about your strange rituals, your bizarre beliefs, and the poisons you willingly took in the name of health, and they will drift off to sleep, feeling comfortably superior, never once imagining that their own advanced science is just another form of superstition, waiting to be judged by the future. The details change, but the hope and the fear remain the same. It is the most human story of all, a story of trying and failing and trying again, armed with nothing but the best, most flawed ideas of our time. Sweet dreams,